Yep.
Hi, everyone. It is Janie Joe right here, and I finally hit the record button because I have with me Janyre Tromp, and we've already been talking and talking and talking. So I figured it was time to welcome Janyre. Hi, friend.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's so much to hang out with you. It's so much fun. I love your books. I love you. I love all the things.
Ditto, ditto, word for word, and punctuation points. Absolutely. You have a new book coming out, and I'm really excited about this one.
I stole my son's tablet because it's not in print
Nice.
yet. So I
Yes.
have
Oh, I can
the
see
back
it.
of the cover.
Darkness Calls the Tiger, a novel of World War II Burma.
Yeah.
Okay, I have so many questions, and I'm not going to lie. I have endorsed the book, which means I've had sneak peeks and all of that. So I've got some insider info myself. But first of all, this is a World War II book, and World War II books right now are extremely popular. But this is different in that it's not your European romance dealing with the Holocaust, all of that. We are going to Burma. So tell us, just tell
Yes.
us
So
everything.
I know. And everybody's like, Burma? First of all,
Burma?
where is Burma?
Where's Burma? Exactly.
Where is Burma? Where is this place? So in modern map world, it is Myanmar. So it's wedged right between India and China, and then Thailand is kind of like right down in the middle, like down over here.
Yep.
So that's where it is. And the one little historical thing that just kind of blows my mind about World War II Burma that I had never heard of before is that the OSS forces, so Operations Secret Service, well, I don't even know what that stands for anymore. But it's the precursor to the CIA, and people
Mhm.
are familiar with that from the European theater.
Right.
The OSS was operational in Burma, India, and China as well. And those operations are actually responsible for the genesis of the Green Berets.
It stands for Office of Strategic
There we
Services.
go. I was off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the precursor to the Green Berets. Ooh,
Yes.
that's some.
So all of the tactics that happened, a lot of the tactics that were occurring in this little country were the precursor to special forces tactics. So right off the bat, you know that things aren't going to go linearly like they kind of did a little bit more in Europe. They're
Right.
very underhanded, very dark. Um, but there's a whole theater. It's the China, Burma, India theater. And basically, that theater of war was trying to prevent Imperial Japan from and getting a foothold then
Okay.
basically across that entire continent,
Yeah.
which obviously has been very detrimental.
Hmm.
So it was this theater. I found out about it. I had a friend of a friend whose parents were missionaries in India during World War II.
Okay.
And my friend had said, um, well, because I was looking for something different to write about in World War II.
Right.
I love World War II, but I mean, there's only so many stories that I have been can be told, right?
Right.
Before they sound the same. So
Right.
I was looking for something different. And she said, I think my friend's parents were fighting or doing something in India with the war. At which point I was like,
Right.
what are you talking about World War II in India?
I know you
We're
don't like that's not a connection that you make. I mean, even my grandfather was in the Pacific
Yep,
and fought in all the Asiatic major battles.
yep.
And the Pacific is even less focused on than the European front for whatever reason. But then your book come out, I'm like, Burma. Now wait, this is even more obscure than the Philippines. Like this is a completely different region I hadn't considered before.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So they actually call the CBI the Forgotten War,
Okay.
um, which just like calls to my little historic lover heart to say,
Yeah.
remember me, don't forget me.
Yeah.
And the stories there just kind of blow my mind. One of the really interesting things that as I was kind of digging into, well, what even happened, because I had no idea what was going on in
Right.
China, Burma, or India. I had to look up where Burma was, y'all, too. I mean, let's be honest, I didn't know anything when I started either. And so one of the things that I found was all of these stories of missionaries.
Mm,
started popping up. So it was this little strip in northern Burma that basically prevented the Japanese from going into India and taking over.
right. Okay.
And these people groups, I started finding out was they allied themselves with the West
Okay.
because there were Western missionaries in the mountains who had been
Oh,
there generations, taking care of the people and loving on them and becoming part of their culture. Um,
okay.
to this day, the Kitchen population, which is the group that I concentrate on the book,
Mhm.
they are claim as a ethnic group to be Christian,
Okay.
because of the missionaries that were there.
Um,
Random missionaries from Texas and Ireland. Like,
well, that's a little random. Random
I
city,
know, right?
Texas.
Right?
Well, leave it to Texas, right?
I know. I know. And so the one character that I just kind of fell in love with as I was reading, there were two sets of missionaries that I was just like, oh my gosh, these people are amazing.
Yeah.
Um, One guy's name is Father James Stewart, and
Okay.
Father James Stewart was Irish. And this Irish man was in the mountains, and he was funny and warm, and the people loved him. And when Imperial Japan came in to take over one of the villages in his area that he came for,
Mhm.
he didn't have any guns. He just walked out into the road and convinced them to go away.
Oh, okay. Great.
Right? Like, and he hid refugees. He
Wow.
led and then most of the refugees were women and children. So what happened is the Japanese came into Burma in the south and they bulldozed
Mm,
through the country and they took over like lightning speed. The British were like
yeah.
escaping anybody who wasn't part of the main ethnicity group. They were just vacating as fast as they could.
Wow.
And so Father Stewart was hiding all of these people, um, and then getting them out through the mountains. And by the way, when I say mountains,
Yeah.
these are the Himalaya mountains, like
Himalayas.
the tallest mountains in the world, like
Right,
very
right.
big,
I've
very
been there.
tall.
I've been on Annapurna. Yes.
Oh,
Yes. Because when I went to Nepal and that area and that region
yep,
in Nepal, which is not too far from Burma,
right.
or what was Burma, but yeah, I mean, it was the best I can describe the Himalayan mountains is we were on the rooftop of this hostel we were staying in, and there was clouds everywhere, right? And I'm looking at the clouds, I'm looking up, and I'm looking up above the clouds, and all of a sudden above the clouds you see this mountain peak, which like the Rocky Mountains at that point in time looked like foothills. It was so crazy. So
Yeah,
yeah, when you say they're going over the Himalayan mountains to escape, that's not easy.
no, no, it is not. And
It's
I
not even
actually like,
moderately hard. It's like
it's like,
you're
I
going to
don't
die. Yeah, if it's not the Japanese, it's the mountain. One of them's gonna get you.
one of them's going to get you. Right. And I actually was on the other side. So I was on the Indian side of
Okay.
the Himalayan mountains. And
Yes.
that's kind of where I fell in love with that area.
Mhm.
So my friend who had friends whose parents were missionaries in India during that time frame,
Right.
how I connected with that.
Yep.
But yeah, so anyway, so Father Stewart kind of became the pattern for my hero, Ryan. And Ryan is this kind of bumbling Kai, the main character, the Kylan, who's my female main character, and Ryan, who's my male main character. Ryan comes into her story like when she's 18, grew up, and he comes in as this very Midwestern Indiana farm boy,
Yeah.
uh, huge in her eyes because he's a tall man,
Yeah.
um, in a culture where the people are smaller.
Mhm.
Uh, and he's this bumbling bear of a guy, and she does not know what to do with him. and and Kai grew up. Her mother died when she was young, and that made her dad very angry,
Yeah.
and just trying to survive, which I mean, I understand that 100%. And so this very jovial man comes into this very stark, angry world for Kai and
Yeah.
kind of changes everything for her. And I love the contrast between the two characters. It was so much fun to write
Mhm.
those foils, those contrasts in the
Right.
book.
Right. Oh, that's super fun. Now, in the back cover copy, it says Kai vows to hunt down those responsible, which would be the Japanese in this situation, even if it means she must become the legendary, is it pronounced Shira?
Yep.
Okay, so explain that. What is a Shira and how would have that impacted Kai?
Right. So it was very interesting. So one of the first things as I was reading through different people's accounts of the war in Burma. So I had American soldiers. I actually found it's called the Tales of the Japanese Soldiers, and it was the Japanese soldiers' stories
Oh, wow.
in Burma. And it was one of the best books that I read for research. But I read a lot of personal stories. And one of the things that kept popping up about this particular area of Burma in the Hukong Valley um, was the legend. And they called them were tigers. And for obvious reasons, I don't call them were tigers because that just brings up whole other different picturing.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
but they're tiger people. So they're people who, in some way, shape, or form, take on the persona of a very vicious tiger. Um,
Okay.
so when everything happens to Kai, she has heard this story, this legend
Mhm,
from the storytellers of the kitchen people for years.
mhm,
And she happens to have been born with amber colored eyes, which
mm,
is rare, but
right.
interestingly enough, my daughter kind of has amber colored eyes.
Sure.
And actually, the book is dedicated to my daughter.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
I know there's very good reason for that. My daughter has been through a
Mhm.
lot in her life,
Yes.
and has come out all the stronger for it. Very much like Kylan, my main character. So
Yes.
I didn't write Kylan with my daughter in mind,
Mhm.
actually, but there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
Um, I don't remember what I was saying, Jamie.
We're talking about how the her becoming a legendary
Oh,
Shira and
the
the tiger.
Shira.
Yes.
So she's been told her whole life that she's different, which I
Okay.
think a lot of us can identify with.
Yeah.
She is American in this Quechan culture, in
Mhm.
this Asian culture. Um, she has these eyes that are odd. Um, and where the Hukong Valley actually today has a whole tiger preserve. So
Oh, cool.
tigers are very much part of their culture.
Mhm.
They're a known thing in that area,
Mhm.
and they are the peak predator.
Oh,
During World War II, there were stories you could not take down a tiger with a World War II weapon of any kind, with any
wow.
surety that it would actually die.
Actually work. Right. Right.
They're very strong. They're very big animals. And so Kai has been growing up in this world where everybody kind of looks at her sideways
Mhm.
because they associate her with these legends.
Okay.
And so when all of these bad things happen to her,
Hmm.
um, I think like most of us, she gets really ticked off. She is
Right.
angry.
Yeah.
So they do opposite things. Ryan runs and Kai attacks. So it's that
Okay.
fight or flight kind of reaction to a certain extent. And so Kai takes on this persona of the Shara um, as a way to protect herself,
Okay.
to exact revenge, and to feel like she has control of some kind.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but I'm not a super type A personality. I'm not like all like, I gotta fix everything,
Right. Right.
but I want it done right too. Like,
Yeah.
if you're not going to do it the right way, just get on my way and I'll do it. You know what I mean? And I very much is like that with God. She's like, you aren't doing this right. Whoever
Yeah.
is in control up there anymore, I need right now, you got it wrong. If you can
Right.
let this happen, you got it wrong.
Yeah.
And so she takes that and just it gets dark there for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the reality of what the war was, and that is the reality of what happened in that area. The Quechan people were known as spirit men
Mm,
by the Imperial Japanese soldiers. That was
okay,
kind of their nickname.
sure.
The Quechan Rangers, as a whole, um, had some pretty interesting, as Americans mean interesting, tactics that were very effective. Um,
Yes.
because they would go in as small bands of
Mhm.
people. It was the origination of guerrilla warfare.
Right,
Um,
right. Mhm.
and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I took that on
I
for sure.
relate to that only from the standpoint of, again, different culture, but same region. With being in Nepal, I actually ended up, and this was back in the days when you could still bring weapons back with you through the air. Um, right? Remember that? So this tells you
Oh,
how
I
old.
do.
But anyway, I bought a replica of a Gorka
Mhm.
blade and I brought it home for my then boyfriend, who's now my husband. But it was the story, and then the Nepalese man in the market was telling me the history behind the blade and how they would fight in World War II. And it was like, oh, it was almost how you would picture with a tiger. I mean, again, different culture, but that sneaking,
Yep,
obscure camouflage, and you can just see the tiger's muscles ready to strike. And then the Japanese soldiers, they said, were just terrified to go through the woods or the jungle because they didn't know when one of the Gorkhas was going to strike.
exactly. And that's exactly what the imagery in Darkness Calls the Tiger, what it is. And that is this little girl that you meet. The first pages, you meet her when she's a little girl. Um, and just her soft heart and her fear. And then you see her kind of start falling apart under the pressure of her father's sadness. And then she
Mhm.
hardens
Yeah,
in anger,
right.
which is something that is possible for all of us.
It is. It
You know,
is.
I tell people that
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You tell
I was
people
gonna
what?
say, I tell people all the time that I wish I wrote funny books. I'm like, I would love to write funny books. Because writing hard books is hard.
Hard.
It's hard. So we put ourselves inside those characters and we end up feeling those feelings. But what I love about story is how powerful it is. Story is one of the
Yeah.
most powerful tools that we have as people
Hmm.
to change lives.
Hmm.
And this is backed up by science.
Yeah.
So, like, if I tell you the story about, or if I tell you the statistics about how many people died in Burma um, due to disease or whatever,
Right.
I don't know, right? Like, if
Right.
I tell you those statistics, you'll be like, okay. And the scientists, when they were studying this, like put all the electrodes on people's heads,
Okay.
and the part where somebody's like facts and figures, when
Hmm.
they're told facts and figures, like that lights up and then it goes away when they're
Uh-huh.
done.
Hmm.
And they're very likely to forget it,
Right.
that piece of information. But if I tell you a story
Hmm.
about a girl who lives in Burma,
Hmm.
who watches somebody she loves die from the disease that is easily treatable, even during that time period, because
Right.
there was no medicine.
Right.
If I tell you this story, not only does the fact and figures part of your brain light up,
Hmm.
but the part of your brain where you experience things lights
Right.
up.
Right.
So the so you now have it filed away as something that you personally have experienced.
Hmm.
And that's a much more powerful way to learn than
Right.
just facts and figures. And so that's what story does for us. And so those are the stories that keep getting laid on my heart to tell people, not because I revel in darkness. I'm not like some, I don't know.
No, I know, because people have asked me the same question, like, why do you write such dark stories?
Yeah.
And mine are different from yours in that there's more of a paranormal
Hmm.
play, I'll say, not necessarily a paranormal element, but that
Right.
darkness of death is always hovering
Yep.
over my stories. And people ask me that all the time, and I'm kind of like, I think there's a place for all fiction, honestly.
100%.
And people laugh when they find out that some of my go-to fiction is Regencies, not necessarily the romances, but just a good, solid Regency.
Yep.
I'm not even a Jane Austen fan, but I just like a Julie Clausen or a Sarah Ladd novel to just take me
Yep.
away to a safe little spot that's on the shores of Leicestershire. But, you know, I still write dark, and it's my answer has always been because there's such a darkness in the world, and there's such a darkness in so much fiction, especially in the general market, which isn't bad necessarily. However, the difference is, as somebody who has faith, and I know you and I have talked about this before, as people who have faith that there's hope within the darkness, those are the stories that need to be told so people can come through the darkness of the story and find out that with faith in the Creator, God, who knew us before we were born, there's hope. There's always hope. There's that promise of hope in every trauma, every trigger warning, every dark moment. And even, I'll never forget. I know now this is still your interview. I promise I'll let you talk.
No, this is,
But I'll
but
never
this is exactly, I
forget.
mean, that's
Yeah.
why I talk about
Yes.
these topics to engender these kinds of discussions.
Right. Well, and I read The Hiding Place by Corrie Ten Boom. When I or Boom, is it Boom with an M or
It's
N?
BOEM.
Okay. I read that when I was in high school, and it makes a huge impact on you because it is the rawness and the darkness of the Holocaust. It's a true story. Um, but because I read that book, I ended up looking up interviews where you can actually hear her speak. And that is the woman that epitomizes the definition of why I write darkness, because she tells her stories of darkness and she always brings them through that bitterness and that anger and hatred that she felt. And then that moment, decades later, where she meets one of the Nazi guards that abused and brutalized them, who had now gone through a little bit of a life change of his own. And she found that forgiveness to his face say that, and the hope and the freedom that came from that. And those are the stories that aren't always told outside of Christian fiction.
Right.
There, I'm
Right.
done.
And that's
That's the bridge.
exactly, no, but that's exactly, so Corey, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we have this in common too.
I know.
So
This is why we
I
love
read,
each other.
I read Corey Ten Boom when I think I was in seventh or eighth grade.
Yes.
I read everything she ever wrote. I got the cassettes in my
Yes.
little like Walkman and like listened to everything she ever like spoke that I could get my little hands on.
Yep.
That's what this story is.
Hmm.
It's exactly what this story is there is a light that we can trust.
Yeah.
And doing so, we can find the peace that no one can take from us,
Even in the darkest of moments.
even in the darkest of moments.
And I
Even if
think one
we're the
thing,
ones, even if we're the only points of light.
right.
And if we're the only ones that are a point of light. And that actually happens in this book too. It's one of my favorite moments where Ryan through the story is really Kai's anchor and hit her point of light in the darkness.
Hmm.
And there's a point where he despairs and she takes that little spark of light that he has given her and hands it back to him.
Mm.
I cried. I bawled my eyes out when I wrote it.
Well, I
But
think that's the thing with World War II fiction, regardless of where it's set. Um, because V-Day actually came at some point, but the darkness hovered for so long that it was be people began to believe it was never going to lift. Like this was the new normal after 4 years of war and death and destruction. And I think that's one of the things within Christianity that we need to be cautious of, because I'm stepping over the line now. Jamie's starting to preach. But no, I think as Christians, we want to focus so much on hope and Jesus, yay, and worship moments and these mountaintop experiences. And even when we're going through something dark, we look at people and say, it's okay, because God's given you a promise and a hope and a future. Well, after 4 years of war, these people didn't even see a pinprick of hope or a future. I mean, they literally were readjusting life to live this until they died. And I think as Christians, we forget that God's rescue and his hope isn't tied to this moment in time. And so that promise of a hope and a future is way beyond the moment that you're living in now. It's not a look for it in the next year. That's why children still die of cancer. His hope and a promise is eternal. And as Christians, we need to stop looking at it for this moment and look at it for eternity, because that's what we're supposed to be living for and looking for. And so when I get on my soapbox about dark fiction in Christianity, that's where I really think that there's an extreme need for Christians to become invested in dark Christian fiction,
I agree.
because we need to see eternal light, not light brought into the world now. Because as the world continues and as the world gets darker and darker and darker, we can't set our eyes on finding light now.
Because it
There.
might not be here. It might not be here.
It may
And
never come. Right.
it might not ever come here. And that's one of the things that, so you, people who hang out with you may not know my daughter's story. So I'm going to give like super quick
Go for
snippet
it.
of,
Yep.
so, um, and this is just like one snippet in a broader, we had about a 2-year period of time where we had one thing after another, like my mom having a brain tumor, doctors thinking I had lupus, like
Mhm.
my daughter tore her ACL, um, and like
Right.
horrific thing after horrific thing. And my daughter started getting sick, and she was sick on and off for like 6 months, to the point where I was going to pick her up from school. Like one day I would drop her off in the morning and pick her up at lunch. And then the next day I would drop her off after lunch and then pick her up at the end of
Mhm.
school. So she wasn't missing entire days of school. And this was going on for months and months and months. Doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. We had no idea what was happening. My son had recurrent pneumonia in there,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It was just an awful period of time. And then one day she collapsed at school.
Mm.
And I was like, I'll be there. And they're like, no, if you're not here in 5 minutes, we're calling an ambulance. And I'm like, I'll be there. The school from my house to the school was 8 minutes. I made it in 5, just for the
Oh,
record.
yeah. Mamas
I made
make it
it in
in
5,
five when they need to make it in five.
right? And that was the first time we almost lost her.
Mhm.
And what we found out months and months later, after being in and out of the hospital, all kinds of things happening, that she had had appendicitis for 6 months,
Mhm.
and then her appendix burst, and the doctors didn't take her into surgery for 36 to 40 hours after her appendix burst.
Wow.
So she should not have survived.
No.
She ended up with an infection. It was a septic fungal infection. And so a bacterial infection has a 50% survival rate.
Mhm.
There is not even published survival rates for a fungal infection, septic infection, because they're so rare and
Right.
so deadly. And she survived. And then she started throwing bowel obstructions, which also can kill you. And the first
Mhm.
one almost did kill her, almost. And so like one thing after another, she missed months and months of school. She was sick the entire um, summer. She missed her first week of high school. Uh,
Mhm.
like just lots of stuff going on for
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
Um, and in all of that, I had a lot of people saying things like, I can't get any worse. God's gotcha.
Right.
And I just wanted to reach out and smack people. Uh,
Right.
if we're just being honest.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I would really like to see normalized for people,
Mhm.
uh, and this is one of my little pet sayings, is that yelling at God is still talking to him.
Yeah.
Yelling at God is still talking to him. You're
Mhm.
allowed to be angry with God. Flip to the Psalms.
Mhm.
David had some
Mhm.
pretty strong words for God and his
Mhm.
enemies, for the record, too. It was like,
I
go
know, right?
them
He
and
he
like,
kind of balanced it out a little bit there, but yeah.
you know, and so that is what this story is. It's a permission to be angry, but never to stop seeking, to be angry, but to never stop moving forward, to
Mhm.
be angry, but never use it as an excuse,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and in the end, Kai does come around, and she actually, I, I don't think this is giving anything away. I'm
Spoiler.
like, wait, double check. She does find a way to forgive one of the men
Mm,
who destroyed her village.
yeah,
Um, and like I said earlier, the probably one of the most powerful books that I read for research was The Tales of by Japanese Soldiers,
right.
and just giving me insight on that side of things, because so often we never put ourselves on the other side.
No, we
It's
don't.
very easy to feel righteous where we
Yes,
stand.
it is. It
Uh,
is.
and so I loved that. And I loved that I was able to um, bring that story around too, and to have that kind of conversation
Mhm.
inside the book.
Yeah,
Um, because forgiveness is hard. It's not a
it is.
one-time thing.
No,
It takes
no, it's a
it takes
daily thing. I mean,
practice.
I can forgive somebody today, and tomorrow I've got to do it all over again because they get mad at them again.
Why do we do this? Why do we do this to ourselves,
No, I think
right?
there's an element of, well, it's a wrong that's been committed, and anybody's going to feel the injustice and the abuse of a wrong that's committed against you.
100%. But
And
forgiveness is freeing too.
it is, it is. But it's a dark place to go through to
Yeah.
get to that point. And again, you have to go through it multiple times sometimes. It's not necessarily a one and done. So
Yeah. And going back to Corey Ten Boom, she prayed to be able to forgive. I
right,
don't
she
want
didn't
to
want to.
forgive.
Right,
Give me the want to forgive.
right, right.
And I think that's always a really powerful thing.
Well, and my thought was always if somebody like her could forgive somebody like him, the wrongs that have been done against me are pretty minor,
Yes.
pretty minor.
So
Not
by
everybody that. I'm just thinking about that me personally.
oh, absolutely.
But
But I think the guy that she ended up forgiving was one of the worst guards that
it
specific
was, yes.
targeted her and her sister. So I think it's a very rare person that we come across that
Mm,
was in a concentration camp
yeah.
where somebody did something like that. So yeah, it was that
Yeah.
was a powerful. I always go back to that when I'm struggling
Mm,
to forgive somebody.
mhm. I'll close with this, and I love this story. It's one that I cherish and hold dear to my heart. But it has to do with World War II. When I was pregnant with my first child, we had a gentleman in our church who was Ukrainian. He was not Jewish, but because of the Germans and that whole area, you know how the story goes. And he was shipped off to work on a German farm, and it
Mhm.
was essentially a work camp, but for a privately owned farm. And it was abusive in its own rights, and he had his own story. He couldn't speak a lot of English, but we had him come to our youth group to share with the kids because we felt this is an opportunity that is
Mm.
not going to be around much longer. And it wasn't. He passed away like 2 years later. So here you have this little, adorable, sweet old man trying so desperately to communicate his story of abuse and trauma and how the Lord brought him through these dark times. And he's doing it in his accent, which was really hard to understand. Well, the night that we went to go see him was a couple nights after I'd had my first miscarriage.
Oh, Jamie.
And so I was going into it with, it might be a rare feeling, but this is how my brain works. It wasn't the feeling of, I've lost my child. It was the feeling of, why are you grieving when
Mm.
people have gone through worse? You don't have the right to grieve. And I'm going to see this man who's gone through just shy of a concentration camp. And I'm thinking, I need to just put my happy face on because you lost a baby, baby's in heaven, things are still good. Suck it up and deal, right? That was my mentality. We get done, he gets done talking, and I've lost it. And I'm not a crier, but I lost it. And I'm also not the person that goes up to the person. Like I will avoid the speaker. I'm extroverted, but I just don't want to be the, hi, I love you, you're awesome, right? But I just felt this need to be near him, which was really strange. And maybe it was the Holy Spirit in him that was drawing me there. And I went up to him And I told him thank you. And there was such a language barrier. He didn't know what I was saying. And I didn't even start to tell him. But he reached out and he cupped my face and he goes, Jesus will take care of you.
Mhm.
Jesus will watch over you. And that was all he said to me. And I just started crying. And he got big tears in his eyes. And I knew in that moment that that survivor could see the pain in my own eyes. And he validated it as my pain. And it didn't change the value of the hope that was being offered. The hope being offered is equal to any pain that anyone experiences on any level at any term. And I guarantee you, when I finally got through 3 miscarriages and I
Mhm.
had my baby girl who went to the NICU and barely survived, I got her home. And one of the first things I said to her when I tucked her in was, Jesus will take care of you. Jesus will watch over you. And I've said that to my kids 1,000 times from the voice of somebody that survived darkness. And we share these stories today because you and I are so passionate about dark fiction being read passionately within the Christian market. It needs to be there, and these stories need to be told. So thank you, Janyre, for writing dark fiction and going to those places that need to be gone to.
I will not say it's my pleasure.
I know. That's not exactly the term we use.
No, it is my privilege.
Mhm.
It is my privilege to bring people to places that are real so that they know how to deal with it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on that note, Darkness Calls the Tiger by Janyre Tromp, a novel of World War II Burma, comes out in May
Yep.
14th.
May
May
14.
14th. And it's available for pre-order now. So go out, get your copy, get it pre-ordered. Please share about this book. Please share about it on the internet with your friends, your family, your socials. Bring awareness to the heroes of the faith that have gone before us. And yes, even though it's fiction, it's based off of real life stories. And so those are stories that need to be remembered and heard and brought hope within the Christian market. So please make this a priority to put on your to be read list.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thanks for being with us, Janyre.
Absolutely.